Viewpoints on the talk station, FM 107 AM 1240 and FM 92.9. Joining us this afternoon, Ardis Watkins. Ms. Watkins is the Executive Director of the State Employees Association of North Carolina, the acronym SEANC, S-E-A-N-C. She joins us this afternoon to talk about legislative action that involves the State Employees Association. Ms. Watkins, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's talk about this topic, one that has been editorialized in the Carteret County News-Times and newspapers across the state, involving transparency and this issue of Senate Bill 355. You have authored or actually co-signed a letter to the Senate opposing this legislation, Senate Bill 355. What is the conflict here?
Well, just going back a step, SEANC opposed this exact same legislation several times before when it failed. And it failed because we were able to get widespread support among legislators that this was an overly broad attempt that's a well-meaning attempt, but it attacks a bunch of people that are not the problem.
In what regard is it broad and overreaching?
So this bill would make every personnel file where a disciplinary proceeding is described, and that's just the supervisor's description of what they think the employee did wrong, it would make it available to the public. So there's multiple layers of issues with this. Number one, the stated reason the Press Association says they want this bill is to let taxpayers know what's going on with their employees. And frankly, we think it'll have the opposite effect. We think it'll be a chilling effect, and once supervisors know this is going to go public, then they're less likely to write things in the personnel file. They're less likely to put that stuff in there unless they're a supervisor that is not well-meaning, who's vindictive. Maybe it's a small town. A lot of state facilities are in small towns, and sometimes you have supervisors who've known somebody for a long time, and they might have a bad purpose for putting an allegation in there that's unfounded. The problem with that is, at that point, the onus is on the employee. The burden is on the employee to prove that it was wrong, or it gets published to the world. And employees who work for the state don't have the kind of money it takes to go get legal representation and go through a Byzantine maze of steps they would have to do in order to get this removed. So people are pretty much just going to sign what the supervisor said, and it's going to affect their lives. It's going to affect their reputation. It's going to affect their liberty interest in getting another job. It'll have profound effects on them. And again, the Press Association said, they gave the examples of police who have not been good police officers and then get moved around because their personnel file didn't say what they had done wrong. And they also gave the example of teachers. If there are problems, then those need to be addressed, and there are plenty. I mean, I've been around state government for 28 years. There are plenty of ways under the State Human Resources Act to handle poor performance and bad behavior, and we should expect that from supervisors. And this bill lets them get around that.
To take that issue of the performance guidelines and the human resources aspect of the state government, wouldn't those same resources and services apply to employees who may feel that they have been unfairly targeted?
Actually, Lockwood, there's nothing in this bill that would hold a supervisor who puts something in a file that is unfounded, that holds them in any way accountable for that.
Isn't that a problem within the organization, the agency? Shouldn't that be dealt with there? It is interesting.
It won't be dealt with.
Why not?
It won't be dealt with if we allow supervisors to write whatever they want, put the burden on the employee who's not going to have the resources to fight it.
Doesn't that same condition currently exist? I don't see how this bill in any way contributes or inhibits that process.
The condition exists. We do need better supervision. We need better training for supervisors. There's no question about that. Everyone would agree with you. The difference here is this bill would then take bad actions of supervisors who in many cases do not have adequate training and make them public accusations. And in this day of cancel culture where you can throw accusations out there and ruin someone's life, that doesn't seem like it's a good idea. If we already know we don't have a rigorous enough standard for supervisors to let them make accusations and then make it public where there's going to be groups. It's just who we are now as a society. There's going to be groups who take that information that's made public, and they pick people to target. Again, it's going to be a cancel culture situation.
You're using that as an excuse not to correct a deeper problem, it seems to me, Ardis, in the sense that there are human resource issues within state government that need to be dealt with. You're basically acknowledging they exist currently. We should address that. It goes back to the issue of the public, though. Should not the public have the access to information about the people whom they are depending upon? And I'm not talking about supervisors, by the way. I'm talking about the individuals that are actually providing services. For example, 911, rescue personnel, or in the case of teachers or law enforcement. And, it is interesting that both the Sheriff's Association and the Council of District Attorneys in North Carolina, Paul, agreed that this is a worthwhile bill. We're talking about Senate Bill 355, that provides only information about the performance records of the individuals, their qualifications. We've had numerous...
It's not their qualifications. It's allegations made against them that are disciplinary. And I'll give you an example. And by the way, the Sheriff's Association and the Conference of District Attorneys deal with people's liberty or the public's money. That is a public interest, we can agree, is something that it's a higher level of public interest. This bill literally puts any disciplinary accusations against any employee. So if I've got somebody in a steno pool in Anson County and they've been late because they're having marital trouble and their child care issues are messed up, and they've been late 3 times that month, the person in the cubicle next to them will be able to know that information should this bill pass.
Well, I would think they would know.
There is no public interest in that. That's gossip.
Well, there
Ardis, is no public interest.
Ardis, gossip is unique, and not unique. Pardon me. That we hear it and experience it all the time in the workplace. I mean, that is in fact a reality. So I don't know that this bill in any way contributes to that. In fact,
why would you have a public? Why would you want to give public credence to gossip and have an unfounded allegation?
How is that? If an employee is late consistently, that is not unfounded gossip. It is in fact a fact. So I think that is something that, frankly, the supervisor needs to be accountable for.
The problem is they're accountable for putting that in there, and their supervisor is supposed to deal with them if their employees are not performing and they're not addressing it through the proper procedures we already have in place. I can make an accusation against someone. It may or may not be true, and it goes public.
This goes back to the aspect of the department and agency's human resources structure that needs to be refined. You've already identified that there is a failure there. That needs to be addressed right now. And
the failure that's there is what's there in any workplace. This is why, I've done employment law for 28 years, and this is why if you have a private client, you always suggest to them when they're asked for a reference, when they're asked for any information about employees, you just say, hey, the best thing for you to do is say, they worked here from this date to that date.
Right.
And the reason is you're never going to have a perfect workplace with perfect supervisors. In this case, these would be made public, these accusations.
We've already seen other instances where, and I can just pick on a recent circumstance in Durham Public Schools, where the personnel records, were apparently not made available to even the administrators in the public school system and to the parents. And of course, we're talking about a Durham public school system where a teacher was suspended and then later, if I understand it correctly, fired. And there was a settlement as a result of that. And there are a lot of questions that are still outstanding that the parents, the taxpayers, and the state need to be advised. It strikes me, Ardis, that in many respects, what you're doing is simply band-aiding over other problems by trying to keep absent or secret the information that the public should have a right to know as both the employer and as the recipient of the services.
If it's in the public interest, if somebody has control over money or someone's physical liberty, then absolutely, that is a different situation.
Wait a second. Again, public interest teachers, we're talking emergency personnel. I often talk... This bill affects everyone, Lockwood. So yes.
If I am in the steno pool in Anson County and I have no control over money of the taxpayers, I have no control over anyone's physical liberty, everything that a supervisor might write about me, whether it's true or not, would be made public.
But if the process within that agency, within that steno pool, is not appropriately applied, that is a problem of that agency. That should not fall to
So
the...
you want the employee to pay for the
No,
problem?
ma'am.
Of
I want the
That's
agency.
what'll happen.
But I want
That's
the
what will
agency. But the agency needs to be held accountable. So should their
But
supervisors.
the agency wouldn't be held accountable.
Why not?
The person would be.
Why?
The person would be.
That-
How is the agency
this
going
is-
to be held accountable
this is
if
no-
they're allowed to put unfounded accusations that end up being made public? The agency doesn't suffer in any way there, but regular people do. Again, this bill is promoting some sort of cancel culture of rank and file regular working people, but the people that you really want to get information on, the people in power, they're not going to suffer under this.
Well,
In fact, if they have power, there are already ways to get information on them.
then the error exists internally, not externally, and it strikes me that the public should still have access to that information, and in the process will learn that there are errors in management, and I use the term human resources, in the way that employees are handled. The only way we know this is if we have documentation. So this basically continues a failed system in some regards.
This is remarkable to me. I mean, the Press Association is so doggedly pursuing this bill and absolutely obsessed with rifling through personnel files, 90% of which are about people who have zero power. And yet we've had very little interest from the press in the fact that our treasurer is fighting hard to make what the state health plan pays in terms of billions of dollars in health care.
Wait. I'd have to disagree with you. I have to disagree with you on that right out.
Very little interest.
Because
we're getting very little interest in the past. We have very little interest in what we're paying investment managers. We have very little interest in DOT contracts. Hundreds of millions of dollars that affect taxpayers in a very real way.
Now, all of that isn't
near as hard to make those public as they are to make a rank and file state employee's personnel file public. It's bizarre to me. No,
it's not bizarre, because I would say right out the gate you're wrong. We have, and for example, particularly this radio station and this newspaper have noted on numerous occasions the success of the state treasurer related to the Department of Transportation. The state has been very aggressive about what amounted to bad use of funding on the State Department of Transportation.
But legislative committees never required that the department come forward, show what we're spending on hundreds of millions of dollars in contracts, compared them to what it would cost to do that same work with state employees. Never came forward with that, and the press never made a big deal out of it. The thing is, this is compelling to the press because it's gossip of regular people.
No, ma'am.
It's very compelling. When the government's the employer, the Constitution comes into play.
Right.
If the private employers do something, the Constitution doesn't apply because it's not the government.
Well,
but the government can't legislate its way around the Constitution.
The government is not legislating its way around the Constitution. The people of North Carolina should have access to information. Ardis Watkins is with us this afternoon, and I'm continuing the conversation with her. We're talking about Senate Bill 355 that basically promotes transparency only for performance records of state employees. And the other aspect of this, Ardis, I have to mention, 36 states already have codified legislation of this nature that identifies the availability and the ability of the public to have access to performance records. And I might add, North Carolina's efforts are not as severe as, say, for example, Florida and Texas and Georgia. So I have a major concern here about the fact that we've already got other states that are doing this, and it has not posed a problem in those states.
Number one, there are a couple inaccuracies here. The first thing is you just said it's to open up the performance evaluations of state employees. It's not. It's about the disciplinary. Anything put in the file that's disciplinary. There's a difference between performance and whether it's disciplinary. So performance evaluation is a term in state government to mean how you did over the year. Discipline means a specific instance. And so, again, these would be allegations of disciplinary problems that in most cases the employee doesn't have the resources to, or even the understanding of how to fight, because it's a very complex process.
What's the purpose of the State Employees Association? Doesn't SEANC provide some guidance to these employees?
No, we do not provide legal representation. That's not.
I didn't say legal, but guidance, suggestions, recommendations. Is there not?
You need a lawyer if you're going to fight these things. You need a lawyer. you need someone who can walk you through the process.
And would that not apply also to private sector? I mean, this is nothing new.
But we're not talking about the private sector right now. We're talking about the state.
But we're talking about the same experience.
The state has specific points in the in the appellate process for an employee, and they really require an attorney because they are very difficult and complex, and it's too expensive for for employees to get an attorney. They're regular working people. These are not people that make big money, and they can't have that luxury. Again, this would be legislation to put a burden on regular folks that when they're accused of something that they know is false, they not only don't have the resources to fight that, but now they have to face that it's going to be made public and affect all the rest of their opportunities to ever get any other employment or their reputation. And the fact of the matter is, what you're going to get is sorry employees at that point.
Well, it hasn't happened in 36 other states, number one. Number two,
it's not 36. That's the other inaccuracy. I'm not sure where. I think the Press Association kept saying that at the legislature. That is not accurate. There are only 11 states with laws that are as restrictive as the one we're talking about right now. And I mean, I'm happy to debate this. I've got the information, and so I never go forward without having the information. That would be foolhardy. But I'm not sure where y'all are getting that state that's inaccurate.
Ardis, why is it that we as the employers and the taxpayers should not have access to information that would greatly influence the day-to-day lives of our community? And I go back to, you mentioned the steno pool. What about teachers? What about rescue squads?
Everybody, and that's the entire point.
Excuse me?
You just said it yourself. I said this bill, though, would affect everyone, not just people who have control over, our physical liberty of our citizens.
Take for example the situations, and I can reach back a variety of experiences with supervisors and staff, and a particular case just jumps to mind, that of Wake County, when the Register of Deeds was found to have embezzled millions, and there's
a public official, absolutely,
and there were 3 employees who were finally brought to bear on this issue as well. Should not
had control over the public's finances, absolutely.
Well, no, you say over control. They were no different than any other employee. They were processing. They were
not rank and file employees. They were higher level employees. These were not rank and file employees you're talking about in that scenario.
Obviously, we disagree on this, and of course, just to clarify this, yes, I am a member of the North Carolina Press Association, and I am a supporter of Senate Bill 355, and of course, you disagree with me on that, and that was the purpose of our conversation today, to share this with the audience. Where is the State Employees Association North Carolina? I know that you have joined a letter with the North Carolina Association of Educators, NC Justice, and also the Teamsters. Is SEANC seeing this as a union process, or do you see this as a public process?
I don't see what unions have to do with any
of
it.
The joint, the fact that you
about the individual liberties and the public interest, and whether or not it's there. And the public interest simply isn't there in knowing, what a rank-and-file employee has in their file as an accusation. There's just no public interest there, and we're spending an inordinate amount of time on this issue in the legislature, and it's just amazing to me. When there are so many things we cannot get to. It came up in committee. We cannot, as a state, when an ethics complaint is made against the legislator at the General Assembly.
But the fact of the accusation is public. So I would argue.
And in this bill, the description of disciplinary action against an employee would be made public. So it would open up more information about rank and file accusations against rank and file state employees than we have against legislators for accusations of impropriety.
The same accusations are made public in
Do you think that we shouldn't know when there's ethics?
When there are ethics, the charges. On the contrary, the charges are made public. The conclusion of those charges,
the description is not.
The conclusion of the charges may be withheld, but maybe the same situation applies in the disciplinary action of state employees.
Nope, that is that's made public.
Well,
So again, so do you not think the standards should be at least as stringent for people we elect to public office
I think
as it is for rank and file state employees?
no disagreement there. We would fully agree with you on that one as well. And we think that it is happening.
Then you should seek to amend the bill that way.
All right.
So
Ardis,
that the public, if you're interested in the taxpayers having knowledge, get them that knowledge.
Ardis Watkins with us this afternoon. Ardis, thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate
Thank you, Lockwood.
Viewpoints on the talk station, FM 107, AM 1240.